All right, people. Bismillah. First and foremost, as always, in line with the customs and convention, I have to do a sound check. Is this sound getting through? Where are donde están? Where are mi gente on Facebook and YouTube? Can you all hear me loud and clear? I'll just right. So I can see some names already. Hassan, Ahlan wa sahlan, Scorpio. All right. Let me just sound coming through all clear. Shukran. I see Sarah's son. Much appreciated. All right. So, Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. والصلاة والسلام على رسوله المصطفى وعلى عباده الذين ارتضى ومن بهداهم اهتدى وبآثار أهل المدينة اقتفى وبعد فسلام الله على القوم أهلا وسهلا بكم ومرحبا Juan Layth, bienvenidos a todos بخير راغلي خوش آمدید سسری اکال kem cho and swagatam people swagatam. All right, so what is going on? All right, salam, Mufti Bhai, sup, Rami G, what is going on? Somebody saying they can't hear me. Cha. Right, I take it you all can. Right, so Fahad, you're doing it. Thank you for the voice of reason in a confused world. Shukran, much appreciated. Love from Australia. All right. Right, so what is going on? Well, one of those days, I'd been quite distracted. Very productive day, alhamdulillah. But quite exhausting. And I thought, chalo, der aaye durust aaye. You know, the proverb, even if it's late, it's gotta be early somewhere in the world. Let that go down as one of my legendary quotes. So I thought, look, let's get on there, get this show on the road, whatever we can do. Today, what we'll take a look at, I'll bring up, I should have. All right, so what we'll take a look at today, I wanted us to explain what it is, and then we'll come back to the topics. All right, so I'm keeping a personal connect with the Quran, and I'm going to choose an example. This second topic is just introducing a figure I just want to speak about because it's actually to do with the third point, which is Salah in the Quran, objective and overview. I want to speak a bit about the Salah in the Quran. What does it actually say? Does it tell us about it? What are the objectives? Why should we actually be praying? What does it do? Its function for us, and does it determine your iman? That's an important point. And tying in with that story before, I suppose it's good to speak about an individual. We'll introduce a key figure from the Mohad Dynasty, which is the Muwahhideen dynasty, people. So, in the words of the poet, Hal ataka hadithu ahli Andalusin. Allah. Has the story of the people of Andalus reached you? Faqad sara bi hadithiha ar-rukban. That the people have taken the tales far and wide. So it's an interesting personality. I'll speak about him. Well, the Pygmalion effect actually comes in with him as well, but in psychology. But also it ties in with Salah. So that's why I thought this is an interesting point, and you'll see why when I come to it. Then what we'll do is we'll take some of your questions, as always, live. You're more than welcome to send them in. Obviously, I have to prioritize the super chat man. And then I'll share the link and bring some of you on, and we'll wrap it up, people. We'll call it a night or an evening or a morning, wherever you are in the world. You know, we are international people. Somebody's already jumping the gun and saying, what does Salat do? Look at that. So whilst I'm just getting ready, I'll let you guys do the drill. अब शर्म आती है कि मैं बार बार बोलूं, you know that, and उकर्र نفس الكلام مرة بعد أخرى. This one not nice. So you know the drill. You like, you share, you spread the love, man. Spread the love, man. Don't do the love, don't do the hate. Okay, so all right, let's see some who's tuned in. Clear. All right, always a pleasant face to have on live. Right, so Mufti Bala Sani. All right, let's have the Bala Sani. All right, Abdul Basit, you're doing it. You're doing it. Imi, all right, Ahlan wa Sahlan, I take it. You know, I'm quite surprised to learn. I was just discussing on the Discord server yesterday, actually, which we're having a bit of a chit chat. And it's interesting to learn that the COVID debate seems to have got quite heated up as of now, but across the pond. So stateside and Canada, everybody's really debating over it. But my perception is here in the UK, it's kind of, it's died a death. Their life is as usual. Masks are no longer mandatory. Most people have possibly returned to their places of work. Or maybe some people are working from home, but the COVID restrictions have drastically decreased and life is as usual for the most part. So it was quite interesting chatting yesterday with some of the guys stateside and that side of the pond about how everything is in a huff and a puff over there. And whoa, it's interesting. Interesting. We're clear saying that we may be going into another lockdown in the UK. That's interesting. I did see some occasional headlines and then they kind of scrap them. They say no, you know, then they say maybe there should be a passport, and they say no, then they say maybe they should just be double jabbed. No. I don't know. I feel, I don't know, I'm just going with what my psyche is reading from the zeitgeist, and that is that it seems to be a bit of a dead debate in the UK. And even though the infection rate is high, I don't think the death rate is high in the UK. Allahu A'lam. Well, that's that. Which does remind me, speaking of debates, I watched again. What's that show? It's called, I've forgotten the name of the, it's a Canadian show, something The Agenda with, it's a talk show, but it had Jordan Peterson. It's an old show when Jordan Peterson was taking on the whole gender expression stroke pronoun case against the Ontario human rights or whatever it was in court. And prior to that, he'd gone on many of these talk shows, but he's on this talk show and there's a bunch of people on there and this debating, I've forgotten what that law was, C1, whatever it was. And it wasn't, I have to say, it was an incredibly fascinating discussion, although it's now old, but it was, I was just going through, I don't know why it came up and I just started watching and then I was like, and this whole thing about pronouns and the points that people were making. And I found it very fascinating, I have to say, because I do find myself agreeing with the fact that government should not legislate language. And I found myself definitely, I could see that Orwellian kind of slope of, and actually part of the book club we are reading this month, which is juxtaposed with, Orwell's 1984, but this is Huxley's Brave New World. And this is for the book club. And this is a softer, kind of tyranny, if you like. It's a fascinating read. Those of you that want to be a part of, I suppose, even though we've restricted some of the book club members, but those that want to read alongside and join the end of month book discussion, do read it, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. So yeah, coming to that point, I found that a crucial argument that government can legislate, that they can ban words. I get that. If the words have become associated with hate crime. So for example, racist slurs and things like this. But can they, so that's negative legislation, that they are saying, don't use this word, people get offended. Okay. Can they positively assert and restrict words that everybody must use a particular word? See, that's interesting, because that's almost borderline creedal, isn't it? The government saying, well, everybody must use such and such word. And I as well find myself amongst those that doesn't see the 30 odd gender kind of pronouns as naturally flowing. So I definitely don't know them. I know there's things like je, je, I think there's a per, I honestly don't know them, but I find it quite amusing, because I think in that sense, where do people draw the line? Because if somebody said that they wanted their own, like let's say I come up with an Arabic word or Arabic letter, I say that every time you refer to me, you must say qaf, dad, ayn. I said, well, if you don't, I find that highly offensive. I find it quite, it's you're hurting my expression. It's an interesting debate. So yeah, I thought whilst you guys were clicking like and share, as you ought to be doing, right, Muhammad Hassan, what is the Islamic perspective on forced vaccinations? There is, when you say Islamic perspective, I don't know what that means, in the sense, there isn't something in the Quran or Sunnah per se like that. Obviously, they didn't have vaccines like that. But you draw from general broad principles of Islam, of the greater good, al-maslahat al-amma, which is the greater good, or where legislative bodies will take powers into their hands to safeguard. So the hadith that if you hear of a plague, an outbreak, do not leave the town. This hadith is clearly a safeguarding measure. It's not something about divine instructions. And hence, Sayyidina Umar did leave the town when the plague broke out, and was, and some people tried to criticize him for that. And they said that, Atafirru min qadarillah, do you run from the destiny of God or the decree of God? Interesting. And his reply was, Afirru min qadarillah ila qadarillah. I go from the decree of God to the decree of God. And so I think these things are relatively arbitrary. The Islamic debate would be no different to the current debate that is taking place. I do find it quite surprising that the level of censorship is quite alarming, actually, because we have entered a new age. I think, I think COVID has done many things for us. And one of the things it's done is it's given us a glimpse of the dogma of old. You see, because historically you had heretics and you had orthodoxy and the church and burning people at the stake almost. And today, or for a considerable amount of time, Europe or the developed world, first world, if you want to call it that, hasn't really been a part of those kind of ideologies. And people have taken liberty in a considerable amount of freedom. But now, all of a sudden, COVID has become the religion of old. I mean, this is because, the religion of new. This we're seeing people are being shamed. Like if you do call for a question, like if you call for a debate, or you are dubbed a conspiracy theorist, and people don't want to be called that, there's a shaming to it. So people are passively being coerced into something. And it's interesting watching it kind of unfold, because if you speak out against COVID, let's say, or challenging the status quo, if you do it on YouTube, you will be it's very likely your channel will be shut down, or at least that video will be removed. Now that's interesting, because that same immediate shutdown or censorship doesn't even apply to terrorism. I mean, how wild is that? Because somebody could be preaching extreme hatred. They could be preaching killings, and they could be speaking about gang retaliations. They could be speaking about all kinds of things, and social media will not shut them down easily. It may shut them down after an excessive stretched out investigation and repetitive reporting. But if you question, or if you call to some kind of a debate on the coronavirus situation, you will be shut down based on misinformation. Now, I just find it interesting. To be honest, I'm kind of ambivalent. I'm not, I've had the double vaccination, and I'm not that kind of fussed. I did have COVID earlier in the year, and it did kind of knock me out for the count, but I wasn't, to me, I saw the vaccinations as, sure, they will, if anything, just help. And I didn't see them as a huge conspiracy. And I saw that they also served a utility to travel. So, yeah. And if anything, I personally do think on the health side that they are more helpful than not having them. That's where I lie. But I'm not one of these, I'm not so passionate either side. But it's interesting watching this becoming a new religion almost, that, people who say this and people who say this, and even that free speech is shutting them down, and they're being termed wackos and nutcases. And, it's mad, because it's like takfir being done. You kafir, and we're watching it in real time. So, yeah, I thought, it's interesting to share those thoughts. Next question. I see Saracen. Shukran. Much love for the super chat you do. How should a Muslim react when they Sheikh Hujjah? Mufti. Okay. Steps out of grace and commits haram. Do we condemn them forever or forgive them? A conflict of interest question here. No, I'm joking. Right. So, okay, let me take that off and take that off. Okay, so right. So, um, that's an interesting question. How do people respond to sheikhs falling out of grace? I mean, it would depend on what they've done. And I guess, like all things, it would be proportionate to, you see, it depends because it's understandable. You see, I feel that there's a spectrum, a continuum, and we put the sheikh title aside for a moment. We just consider any human being. We are judgmental as people. Now, sometimes more so than others, and it depends on what we find somebody doing. So somebody maybe I don't know, like let's say they've stolen something and they've committed fraud. Now, people will be very less likely to put them in a position of trust managing funds. And I see something like that not very different in this case, whether they are a sheikh or not. So if somebody, it's usually, I would assume it should be commensurate and reflective. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of sheikhs and what do sheikhs get. There is fraud. Sometimes some sheikhs that is hurled at them. Usually a common one will be the you see, now that's actually interesting, that discussion of relationships, because relationships is one that is often hurled at many of these imams. Now, it depends, once again, what is going on, because you see, this would not be deemed a crime, but it would depend on what they've been doing. So if, let's say, an imam is using his imamship to exploit people, then that would be wrong. Okay, and that would be wrong. So, for example, because the imam is, I don't know, he's in this masjid, he knows such and such person is going through a tough time financially, or such and such person has, that woman is now a widow, and this person is this, and she's just like this. And he's kind of like, in a conniving way, exploiting these people. If something, that's obviously an abomination, that's utterly abominable. But that's not how I think a lot of these cases that transpire appear. A lot of them are usually a two-way kind of interaction between people. My advice would be that, look, this is why these religious things are really just a shambles. In all honesty, I would say imams, these people, this is my advice, they should do this independently. Their livelihood and living should be something entirely separate. That think entrepreneurially, think with an enterprising mindset, invest in businesses. Do not have this as your life. Do this for a passion, for an interest, and don't try to mix it. But then you see, I would say as well that I am a bit reluctant sometimes to accept. I know more so, I think stateside, we hear a lot of these kind of stories. And I am a bit reluctant sometimes, Allahu A'lam, I don't have access to all the information, to accept as well what people call, I'm a bit skeptical about the term spiritual abuse, because I'm not quite I don't fully understand what people mean when they say that. But otherwise, anything that is clearly criminal is criminal. So if a person's been caught stealing, if a person's been abusing, beating up people, he's an imam and he's beating up the kids, he's sexually abusing, God forbid, he's doing things like this, then this is clearly an abomination, and that person should not be put in a position like that. If a person's been abusing little children and you bring him back, God forbid, I mean, that's utterly reckless. But yeah, so those topics aside, there is this one area which people call spiritual abuse, which I'm personally a bit, I do understand parts of it, but parts of it seem very arbitrary to me. So people say things, and I don't want to mention names of certain imams who had been embroidered, or found themselves in these kind of situations, and women had said, well, I was in a relationship with this guy, this imam, and this imam, I had all these hopes inside me that he will offer me a lifelong vision, but he didn't. And you see, in these kind of things, I see that no different as any relationship with anyone, whether the person was an imam or an engineer or an accountant or a lawyer or an author or an artist or a musician or a regular person. It makes no difference, because relationships are relationships. People fall out of flavor and favor with people. And I think as well, we have to understand that, you see, we've got a bit of we do have a problem with a generation of people who are this social media kind of, I know this isn't going to sound nice when I say it like this, but social media narcissists. And there is this kind of me, which I like to call Generation Me. So because that's what they are. And you see, to them, there's a sense of entitlement. And people do feel, and this is no longer restricted to just religious or imams, or this is everywhere, in everything. And they do translate every hurt as abuse. And that's not necessarily the case. So, as in, what I mean by that is, so let's say, you see, let's dumb it down. Let's say your friend doesn't want to be your friend anymore. You can't say he's abusing me. Like if my mate now didn't want to hang out with me anymore, and I call him, I say, hey bro, come on man, let's chill. Like, and he starts blanking me, and he doesn't. Now, let's say nothing's happened, but maybe he's just fed up of me, or he just no longer likes my personality. So I say, hey bro, what's going on? Let's chill out, man. You want to go to the gym? You want to chill out? Doesn't reply to me, and we were good friends, let's say, hypothetically. Now, a couple of times, let's say he just replied, oh, too busy, doesn't really. I would feel hurt. I'll be honest. That's because nazuk mizaj. I'm a sensitive person, man. But I'm being honest, I would feel hurt. But I can't call that abuse. I can't. You see, not every hurt translates as abuse. But now you change that scenario into a different scenario, and people would say, well, that does. So this is what I'm saying. I feel that because we have this, sometimes a generation of people that, I don't know, like they feel a sense of entitlement that if they are hurt on anything, that's abuse. Like, I'm hurt, my feelings are hurt, I'm abused. Like the discussion I said earlier on, like pronouns or anything, like, oh, if you don't, my feelings are hurt. And hurt translates as abuse. So you've abused me. And I think what this does is it belittles the word abuse, because really abuse is an atrocity. And it shouldn't take away from true victims of abuse, because you're putting yourself, this person is a victim of violence and a victim of atrocious attacks and grievous harm, and domestic violence and sexual assaults, and oh, my friend doesn't want to be friends with me, and they also want to be in that camp. I went to buy, my local shopkeeper stopped buying those kind of things, but I like those flavored lollipops. There was some famous some woman, a famous, I think, TikToker or something, American, and she went into, I think she's got, I don't know, ridiculous amount of followers, and she went into some, I think, dessert shop, or it was a cake shop or something, and they didn't have vegan, they didn't have, I think, vegan, not flavor, vegan cakes or whatever it was, desserts. So she threw this huge mega tantrum, and she bust up the shop, threw stuff around, and I'm going to do this, and then did a campaign on her social media to set her her K-pop fans on that little business, and actually damaged the business because she had like 1 million or whatever it was followers. So you see this, and I remember I was watching this thing on YouTube about, I've forgotten the lady's name now. I think her name was Demi something, but and so it's crazy. We have a generation of people who have a lot of power all of a sudden. So, and they do have, and I give something to, and I admit that the younger generation do have this vocal concern for humanitarian crises around the world and human rights, and they seem to have that outcry, which is noble and admirable. So they do, they want to condemn racism, they want any kind of injustices, but at the same time they're still so young mentally that they like, just, this isn't to belittle them, but they're just so immature mentally, and many of them have got a lot of power all of a sudden because they've got ridiculous followings, and they've got money, some of them, because social, if you've got 1 million followers, that's monetized, you're making an incredible amount of money, and so you've got power, and people listen to you, and but then you throw these tantrums, and it's where does the world go? Yeah, I don't know, it's interesting times. Let's move on to the next question before people say, why is Mufti why is Mufti picking on generation me? I'm not. I have absolute love. Gio. Power has taken another form through social media. It is true, and you see, it's a double-bladed sword, because it could be a force for good, and it is sometimes a force for good. You see how people's lives are changed. Sometimes I've seen there will be somebody who is homeless and he's talented, and they'll make him go viral, and he'll have a successful job, or she will have a successful job and home now, and that's wonderful, and that's the true power that you can see, that we are serving mankind. But then you see this, people throwing a tantrum in a cake shop and canceling the shop. Claire, my son's friend is a TikToker. He's got a blue tick. Yeah, awesome. No, people can use it for. I do love social media. I'm not against social media in any way, but I do see this. I'm just commenting my thoughts on. It is difficult. I get it. It's difficult because you see, young people as well. It's interesting because historically, and not even that long ago, just a few decades, just even going 2 decades ago and backwards, you see, you went through certain almost phases which were like rites of passage almost. So, as a teenager, you weren't really I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm just stating it. You didn't really have a voice. Even as a young person, young adult, you didn't really have a voice. And you usually latched yourself onto some people in some form of almost an apprentice way, maybe a relative, maybe an elder person. And you just did things like that as a kind of like a prospect. Maybe you worked somewhere, you did something, and you kind of got through it until you reached a certain age where now people took you a lot more seriously. But one thing it did do was it taught you to kind of bottle and to contain yourself when things sometimes ain't going as you wish, because even if you did throw a tantrum, nobody would care, and in fact it would just make things worse. So society in that way taught you to handle, or to kind of be able to face, or just contain, just more patient, more. And now you don't need to be patient, because you see, if anything happens, you just go on your phone and tweet it. You say, well, this happened, and it creates in the Twitter sphere. And yeah, so it's interesting, because it's interesting that the internet doesn't forget anything. See, this is another fascinating thing, because I would be terrified at the thought that when I was in my 20s, if my kind of thoughts and the way I would have, maybe, I don't know, my opinions or stuff would have still been online. Oh my God, I would dread that. Thank God none of this existed, because that would just be, it would be like a shadow that would chase me forever. So yeah. Okay. Right. David saying, when will I publish a book on my analyses of Bukhari? Inshallah, why not? Right, let's move forward, people. Let me take a sip before anything. But it is a wonderful world and an amazing time to be alive, I have to say. No matter what people say, it is an incredible time to be alive. We are, I am just, honestly, I'm just immersed in our time as a blessing. I truly do think that. I'm not just saying that. I find it amusing yet amazing. All right, so somebody said, why should we follow the way of the Salad? I think what they meant to say was the way of the Salaf. Right. Speaking of the way of the Salaf and something about being more positive and connecting, you see, I've been emphasizing a lot that we need to connect, and I really would like people to do this, connect with the Quran. Right, Nawaz, shukran for the super chat, much love. That's an incredible question. Do you think immersing yourself in other religions could lead to truths that may be similar to immersing yourself in the details of your own religion? Sure. I mean, fundamentally, religions are saying very similar things, fundamentally speaking. The purpose of religions, for generally and broadly speaking, is to connect a person with the divine, and they have a path to do that, which usually has similar axiomatic teachings like always adhere to the truth, acts of kindness and compassion, serving humanity. These kind of fundamentals, universal fundamentals, are part of all faiths, generally speaking. So I totally agree that if a person was immersed in a different religion, they would still find very similar fundamental values they wouldn't be fundamentally different. They wouldn't embrace, let's say a person became a practicing Sikh, they were a Sikh, and they're not going to all of a sudden become a worse person. They're going to just serve people and adhere to the truth and do good things. So, which is, if a person became a more sincere Christian, it would be very similar. So I totally agree. All right. Ibn Isa, shukran, much love for the super chat. Dearly appreciate. What can I do when I get disenchanted with scholars after seeing their political opinions or their behaviors online? Yeah, I think that is the natural path of growth. You as an individual will grow. Okay. You'll see people, look, scholars are maybe amazing human beings, but they are ultimately human beings. They are not beyond reproach, or they're not infallible. They will make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. And it's not even about mistakes sometimes. It's about they too will go through a maturing process. I can say for myself, I feel I'm going through a maturing process, and I hope I'm always going through this process. I look at some things from maybe a year ago and I feel, I think now I would do this part differently. I look at things from 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I definitely think I will do that differently. And I'm grateful that I think that, because then I feel that I've matured. So you will speak to people who have sometimes views that are very maybe outlandish, or even if they're not outlandish, maybe they lack maturity, they may be too dogmatic, and you hope that these people will mature over time. There is a further challenge with the industry. This is the Islamic industry, which that's what I call it, that there is, because of the sheer dogmatism, it is very difficult for people to sometimes jump off the conveyor belt or the treadmill. So for sheikhs, it's very difficult sometimes, because they now have a following. That following is linked to their livelihood, which is linked to the amount of support they get, and it's not easy for them to just jump off it and change, you see. So this is why you see some of the sheikhs that you do see, and that are going through a kind of a swing, like a like a pendulum, because that's what's going on. They try, and then they feel, oh, I'm going to lose all these people, so they come back and start doing a bit more bashing of people, and then they try to swing back, and no. And that's because they themselves are not ready to be true to themselves. But may Allah make things easy. I do hope in all of this the faith is not damaged. Ameen. Right, so too much humble bragging. I hope not, by people. Yeah, people should keep it real. Somebody said, Sheikh, did I miss a super chat? It's a super sticker by Gold Globe. You're doing it. Much love. No, I answered that, and I answered this super chat. Ibn Isa, shukran, much love. If I did miss one, let me know. Right, okay, what I wanted to do was bring our attention to the Quran briefly, and remind you that I've said this on many occasions. It is imperative that you develop a personal relationship, even if it's very brief. You don't have to memorize the whole Quran. You don't have to be reading a juz a day. You don't have, even if you can't read it every day, whenever, come whenever you can. It is, the doors are wide open. Okay, it is a welcoming book. It is the book of Allah. And read it in a way that you see the message reflecting reflecting insights for your actual life. So let me give you an example. Here was something, I was just taking a look at this today. I thought, let me share it as an example. Surah Al-Layl. Now, this, and you can see this, just one moment. Let me... Right. Okay, it didn't have the, I just want to make sure the number, yep, it's 92. Right, so Surah 92, if you want to, in fact, not if you want to, do take a look at it. Take a look at it in your own time. Take a look at it. Now, you could take a look at this surah, and we know, because one of the amazing things about the Quran is, yes, we know it is speaking about, so for example, it's speaking about the night, it's speaking about these things, but its miraculous nature is whatever you bring to it, it reflects insights about whatever you are engaged with. You see, so you can draw by extension many meanings from the ayat. We know the primary meanings of the secondary meanings, but it gives countless meanings to the people that read it. So you've got وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى, swearing, Allah swearing by night as it immerses, it envelops, as it falls, drapes existence as we know it. But one of the understandings you could take from there is the darkness, the challenges, whatever you're going through. Because that's how darkness, that's how tragedies or calamities, or even if they're not calamities, but they are challenges, obstacles in the path. As Imra al-Qais says, وَلَيْلٍ كَمَوْجِ الْبَحْرِ أَرْخَى صُدُولَهُ عَلَيَّ بِأَنْوَاعِ الْهُمُومِ لِيَبْتَلِي. Allah, he says, in the night, how it draped over me with all these anxieties. كَمَوْجِ الْبَحْرِ, like the way the wave of an ocean envelops people, it comes, engulfs them, just to try them, to give them trials. And you see, so the challenges that surround us, وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى, Allah immediately follows by daylight, as it shines brightly, in all its glory, إِذَا تَجَلَّى. See, immediately beginning with the problems, because we have a negativity bias. Humans, we're more preoccupied with problems than we are with happiness. So beginning with being real, وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى. You see, that it's not far away, because, and in another verse of the Quran, أَلَيْسَ الصُّبْحُ بِقَرِيبٍ, is not dawn just, is it not so close? Yes, the night seems dark, but it will come to a swift end. And it's interesting, the verse that you have, that الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاءَ, that all praise, alhamdulillah, who created the samawati wal ard, وَجَعَلَ الظُّلُمَاتِ وَالنُّورِ. And even there, Allah begins that He placed darknesses in the plural, and then follows it by light. You see, giving you that immediate hope that don't, because when you start thinking, you get real about the problems, the challenges, you can go on a downer straight away. وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. See, this is interesting, because yes, it's speaking about Allah created male and female, but it's also bringing to our attention binaries in everything. So we're not just talking about from matter to antimatter, we're talking about in experiences as well. Your whole life, you measure it. I mentioned problems, and we think about negative things more. That in itself is a binary, you see. But then bringing it back to people as well. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. Allah. Don't think your struggles are equal, or equal isn't the right word. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. That your struggles are diverse. You see, so often what we're doing is we're measuring ourselves against these other people. But inna sa'yakum lashatta. Your struggle is different. This isn't about equality. This is realism. You see, we spoke about social media, people watching this on social media constantly, and you get scroll locked. You're glued scrolling through the screens. Everybody seems so fabulously happy, so tremendously awesome in their lives. This person's on a holiday, that person's with their on a romantic getaway, this person is in a brand new flashy car, that person's sitting with a wad of cash, this person's doing wearing a fancy and a new dress, a new suit, and you're thinking, why am I the only depressed loser out? Because we measure ourselves, I was about to say bil contrast, put the Arabic in there, by contrast. Bil muqaran, we measure ourselves by contrast. And when you're looking at fake, that's not authentic. The person in the photo, that is not their life. Yes, I mean, they've made it, they want you to think that is their life. That may even be a part, a glimpse. It may be, on many occasions it's inauthentic, but even if it is, that's not their life. They have inna sa'yakum lashatta. They have their struggles. You have yours. فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى. So a person thinks, what do I do? How do I progress? Allah begins with man a'ta, the one who gives. But here you're trying to get. You're thinking, I want. Allah begins with man a'ta. Give if you want to get. There is, I'm telling you, there is this counterintuitive formula that makes zero sense when you tell people. And that is that the more you give, the more you get, exponentially. There is, call it barakah, call it, ziyadatul rizq, call it whatever you want. Call it coincidence. The more you give, the more you get. Allah begins with that. فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى, who gives. وَاتَّقَى. Allah then follows it with mindfulness. Is mindful. I like to translate it, taqwa, as mindfulness. People could say God conscious. That's fine as well. Fear is not, to me, an adequate translation. وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى. You see, and this about affirming. You see, there's so many ways, because yes, of course, you affirm righteousness, but you also, you see that it begins with you, that it is there, not just right goodness. It is there. Don't give up. Don't think that there's no, that everything's wretched. There's no, begin in there. Saddaqa bil husna. And then Allah says, فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. You see, we will make it easy. And you see this. Success pulls success. It's true. It's tried and tested. wealth pulls wealth. These things, فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. And we see what's interesting here, the opposite then. وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ وَاسْتَغْنَى. Miserly, tight-fisted people. وَاسْتَغْنَى. And that's a fascinating one, you see, because Allah follows the verb. Istaghna means couldn't care less, went solo, but it also comes from the word to try and be rich. You see, so bakhila, tight-fisted. And this doesn't, by extension, it means in many things. Starting with yourself. Don't be tight-fisted with your dreams, with your goals. Start with yourself. Then the people around you. Your family. Charity begins at home. You have people, this is another thing. People, they want to do not do this. Wallahi, people want to do something. Let me first of all get it on social media. Can you record me giving something to a homeless person? This is not, saddaq, be real. Don't be, this is just another form of miserliness. Me, the ego seeking istighna, you see. And what's interesting, وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى. You see, you got the opposites. فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى. Such people, the down spiraling. You see, just as that positivity pulls positivity, negativity pulls negativity. So keep that in mind. And there's just these verses, I thought, وَمَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُ مَالُهُ إِذَا تَرَدَّى إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا لَلْهُدَى وَإِنَّ لَنَا لَلْآخِرَةَ وَالْأُولَى. Now, that wealth does not, if a person is to fall into misery, wealth is of no avail to them. It's important to remember, you see, that verse, these verses are so important that, look, I always advocate that people should think entrepreneurially, they should think in an enterprising way, be independent. But remember, wealth is not the end of everything. And it does facilitate a lot in life. But if you stoop, if you fall, if you are in ruin, and by ruin, what does it mean? It's not speaking about financial ruin. Everything, meaning in life is ruined. It doesn't bring you that, there's no point to anything. Wealth is of no, فَمَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُ مَالُهُ إِذَا تَرَدَّى. Your wealth ain't going to do anything. Remember, you see, there's two things that really bring life together for us. Memories and experiences. Your memories that you carry with you and your experiences. So invest in them, in you, in people around you, enjoying, and yes, of course, earn, capitalize, spend, invest, serve, experience. But don't cut yourself short on your own goals, your own dreams, your own humanity in trying to be tight-fisted, miserly. Because then at the end of the day, we all at some point, when we think about it, we all at some point will face that final curtain. And we will be there. And what you want to do is at that stage, at least you feel that Lillahi alhamd, I have lived in this dunya. By the grace of God, I have enjoyed. And it's been an incredible privilege. That's what you want. Inshallah, may Allah give it to each and all. Right, I wanted to share that because my point was that this connecting and reflecting is something you can do whenever you want. Let it speak to you about whatever is going on in your life. Right, I'll take a few questions, and what we'll do is we'll then move on to, there's been some super chats or some super stickers. Azarati, you're doing it. Yeah, you're doing it. Much love. There's Max. All right, you're doing it. Shukran. Muchas gracias, Max. Right, so there's a lot of conversations. I don't know what those what these are about. In the age of info, I think the old scholars will be right. Darth Vader. In the age of info, I don't think the old scholars will be regarded so highly by objective thinkers. There's a black hole in the first century, so of early Islam, which has affected its trajectory. Not sure I understand that. I'm not sure I understand that. I think there's been some great scholarship. There's been some great scholarship. And to be fair, most of the Islamic scholarship we have today is built all upon the classical scholarship. It's not very different. Somebody said Monday nights. Fahad, obsessed with Monday nights. Yeah, I've got 200 episodes. Go and watch them. You know, it's like with anything. You have to understand life is full of chapters, and everything has a time and a calling. And chapters are wonderful, but you see, it's the child who's afraid to move on. You see, to let go of the rattle, or to let go of primary school and move to secondary school, or to that's just the kind of insecurities of childlikeness within us, I guess. But it's life. I mean, this, inshallah, is a fascinating chapter, and let's see. Somebody said, I saw a question about the earring. Allahu Akbar. You see, look, I'm trying to get a message, to people. And if it will help them in focusing on the message as opposed to getting distracted by me, who is carrying the message to them in the moment as I speak, then of course, it's not like I don't have to, it's not my religion to say I have to 24/7 always wear a t-shirt. It's not my, it's not part of my aqidah or Islam or Iman to say I have to be, wearing sunglasses or putting on an earring or doing something to do something. So if it helps people, I mean, if when I go to business meetings, I go like this, I go in a shirt, I go in a suit, I go in when I do different things. So yes, when I'm going to the gym, I'm in my t-shirt. So it makes zero difference. If it helps, alhamdulillah, let's allow people to focus on the message rather than getting distracted on, why are you not wearing a shirt? So, or why are you wearing that color shirt? Or why are you? Let's focus on the bigger and better things. Yeah. Ibn Firnas said, Mufti, don't my super chat. I didn't see your super chat, Firnas. So I did. they're sorry, I'm just going back. Let me see. Manak Salim, why did you choose to call yourself Abu Layth? You were pulling the kurta look. I think I, inshallah, can pull every look. Bi'idhnillah. I think there's that much grace of God that whatever look there is, I think I can do it okay, reasonably okay. So now you may say that that's delusion, but chalo. Even if it is delusional, it's a good one. It's a good delusion, I guess. Abu Layth is a kunya that I've loved it. I've loved it. I don't know. Probably I've had it for about 22 years now or something, 21 years or something. I don't know. It's been a long time. Right. So I hope that helps. And yeah, shukran. I appreciate the feedback on the kurta. I do like actually shalwar kameez kind of feel. I do occasionally wear it, but obviously upon occasions and things like that. Right. What Manak, shukran once again. I saw the much love. Sharminda karte hain aap, yaar, all this love. And I couldn't see Ibn Firnas's Ibn Isa. Was this the question? When are we going to get the Mufti Spiritual Physical Fitness series? Inshallah, why not? You see, on the physical thing, I feel, in all honesty, I feel kind of embarrassed to try to do something like that. Because I think that, yes, I'm well into going to the gym. I go to the gym regularly. I'm I suppose, a junkie like that, a gym junkie. But by no measure am I compared to people who run fitness pages and dedicate their life to fitness, the physiques they have and the muscles and the exercises. And I feel so absurd trying to do that. So even though I think I'm okay, chalta hai, it's okay, and there's plenty of room for improvement, but I feel embarrassed trying to train people, saying, look, when you've got real, you go on social media, there's people that are huge. That's the kind of people you want gym sessions with. So yeah. I see Saracen, shukran, much love for the super chat. Mufti socialists, right? Socialists say the concept of community is dead in the postmodern world. Individual can now survive without a community, if true. Concept of ummah or need of ummah dead. That's fascinating. In fact, I should have a mind trap possibly next week with is it Dr. Catherine Joma, who specialized, her whole book and thesis has been on Ummah. And I think it would be a very fascinating discussion, unpacking some of that with her, that what is this notion of Ummah, how it's emerged, how it's developed over time, and and how it's varied, the pros and cons of that. I don't think I accept that we are in the postmodern world, community isn't the way it is, but I disagree. We are not in a post-community world. I don't think humans can live in a post-community world, because humans are social by nature. We are social creatures and we are tribal creatures. But what happens is our community definition has varied and altered over time. So if in historic and prehistoric times, let's say it was a tribe in a very animalistic, in a very similar to other animals, let's say prehistoric times. And as human civilization developed, it became, let's say, settlements, and then it became more agricultural villages, and then towns, and then these kind of cities with which would have pockets of different towns within them with pockets of communities. However, in a more modern society that is very globalized today, our communities are not localized by region. They are defined by affiliation. So this is a community. There's many people, let's say right here, Hassan Ali Yunus, who's in the chat right there, Claire Jones, who's right there, many of you, Imran Khan, who was right there, IC Saracen, many of you would be part, I would feel, are part of a community that I'm a part of. Like, this is our kind of community. I mean, I'm not saying it's the whole of it, but it's a community that I definitely feel a part of. When I've come on live today and I've seen these names, and I don't see just strangers, I see a familiarity. There's a communal essence. So it's shifted. It's not that it doesn't exist. We've just redefined them. They are no longer localized in neighborhoods and regions or locality. They can be wherever. But we have this remote kind of definition, not definition, but a remote connection. So we know that such and such and such and such are the people that we interact with. So yeah. Right. Okay. Happy to be a part of this community. Shukran. Likewise. You're doing it, Lonzetta. Right. Let's move on to the next question. I'm just checking here as well. Look at some people, Warrior hating on IC Saracen for his super chat. Look how Warrior. Who is this Warrior? Why is he hating on other people for showing love? Look at this. Do the love, man. Don't do the hate. This is the problem that we have. Mufti Saab, if I may ask. Go on then. Ask Fahar Murtaza. You're doing it. Why is spirituality not given much focus in today's discussion of Islam? That's an interesting question. I would rephrase that question and say that I feel spirituality has to be rediscovered. That it is there, it is an inherent part of Islam. Islam is built upon the connection of the Ruh. But I feel in the centuries of institutionalization, it got lost. So when people say spirituality today, they think it's about, I don't know, like joining a tariqah of Tassawuf or doing something like this. And that, to me, would not define spirituality at all. I mean, it may be an arbitrary factor. Maybe some people that do that end up becoming spiritual people. But to me, that's just another institutionalized process. The spirituality has to be discovered. I do feel that humanity as a collective are in an era of spiritual renaissance. that there is a spiritual awakening that is happening. It may be slow, but it is happening worldwide. And it began maybe in the last 2-3 decades. And it's just simmered, but and every now and then it may take a little leap. And I feel it's happening regardless of faith, that people who are not even, maybe they're not even sure that they belong to a faith, but they find within them this yearning for a spirituality. And I tell you what will be in the future to come, what will be the gateway and the pathway leading to God, and that will be consciousness. I'm so certain of this, that consciousness is the pathway that will lead millions back to God. Right, let's take a Sajida Madani, ahlan wa sahlan, ahlan wa sahlan. I've just seen the messages now. Ibn Firnas, you're doing it. My super chat, past people didn't experience modern world. Do you think from fiqh perspective, minority views or new interpretations could become the norm? Yes, that's a very good question. And of course, fiqh is our interpretation of what we think the rulings and the judgments ought to be. Our interpretations will vary with the day and age. That's a natural progression. So it's nothing surprising. So let me give you an example. Allow me to elucidate. Right. Most people, and I mean that in the outright, almost everyone, I would like to say everyone, but let's just say the overwhelming majority of mankind, and that Muslims specifically and people generally, will agree that the concept, the thought that one human may enslave, encapsulate another human into his or her property, that this person is no longer deemed an equal with equal human rights and has become akin to a pet or an object, that person has become akin to a dog or a cat or a piece of jewelry that a human can possess. This thought is abominable, and it is an absolute abomination and repulsive to the overwhelming majority of mankind on the globe today. Walillahi alhamd. Walillahi alhamd. And this was one of the trajectory objectives of Islam, to eliminate slavery. But this thought that you have, this zeitgeist, this feeling that we all, and today fiqh would reflect that. And you'd only have somebody who is either seriously suffering from some, I don't know, maybe some psychological health concerns, who would think differently, that would think slavery is still fine. Nobody in their right mind would think slavery is fine. So you see, now that is an entire shift of the human conscience in our time. We have experienced it. And so the fiqh would reflect that. And in fact, if you read all of the fiqh books that were historic, to them, they wouldn't mostly you see, you would be in an entirely different paradigm to them on these issues, because they lived in a world which was enveloped with slavery, and it was so embedded into the structural and economic parts of society that to them it was so normal that even if they didn't like slavery, but they didn't really obsess over it or concern themselves. They just, they don't like it, but they don't think about it. It's like that. So they would have all clearly said, yes, it's fine to own a slave, because they were just in and of their day and age. I'm not blaming them. We would think the same. If I was born 700 years ago, I would be saying exactly the same thing. I would be saying, of course you can own a slave. Even if I didn't like the thought, I would still say that, oh yeah, but still, what do you want us to do? And that's just, we have to understand that that's just the way the world works. And I give an example often of just think of governments. We live in a day and age where governments are normal. But in a few centuries, I do feel we will move into a post-government world. And those people will look back at us and think that, can you believe that they would let a bunch of people dictate and legislate and take taxes from them, and they take income tax from them. So for me to earn, I have to pay. And they were fine with it. They would think that, and you can't, can you keep, what the hell was wrong with those people? But today, when we say governments rule over us and legislate, there's nothing, I'm not anti-government, because there is no alternative method that is better. But in the future, I do feel that mankind will move away from governments and they will become some kind of global, I don't know how it will work, but I do feel that, just as cryptocurrency is changing the entire landscape for currency. It's only happening very slowly right now, but give it a few decades and it will have entirely shifted the game. So because it's moved beyond centralized power, governments don't hold the power to the currency. And believe me, money is more powerful than governments. As you've learned from the book Money, that we're in the past, as Yuval Harari said, where kings and gods have failed, money still succeeds. So as money becomes decentralized, as Bitcoin and these things are, when governments don't control it anymore, right now it's just the beginning, so it's too far down, you can't see it happening yet. But as it becomes more and more powerful, there will be shifts and the world will look entirely different. But you see, those people will look at us and they will think, I don't understand how they ever accepted this. Just as we look at those ulama and think, I don't know how they accepted slavery. But it was because it was their day and age and it was everywhere. And to be fair, Islam was very emphatic on freeing slaves, tahrir raqaba, but yet it did condone the practice because it existed and it was everywhere. It was ubiquitous. You couldn't cancel out the global economic structures. You just couldn't. So somebody said World War III is predicted in just under 20 years. Oh, I could tell you're a barrel of laughs, ain't you? I bet you're the fun and joy of all your gatherings. World War III. Ridiculous. Future wars are not about wars. You see, blessed are the naive. The game has already changed, but you just have to catch up. That's the problem. The landscape for war has changed, my friend. World wars. We won't be seeing world wars. We'll see different kind of wars, but not world wars. Right, so meaning with MALM from a lunar pleasure island. Think about that. Right, let's move on to taking a look at some things on Salah. And I want to share this and have some discussion on it, and then we could, I've still got that. If you haven't caught up with that, then you can watch that. I've got to do the next mind trap, and then we'll have that up there. So let's begin with these verses. Right. Salah, people. First of all, let's just read through some of these verses. Then I'm going to give us an overview, discuss the objectives and some of the rulings. So you've got here Surah Taha. I chose that as the first verse, that Innani ana Allah la ilaha illa ana fa'budni wa aqimis salata li dhikri. See, the important thing, Allah is that making it clear that there is nothing that really, there are no, I know at one level it's saying that there is nothing to be worshipped other than God. There are other layers to that in understanding that nothing is worth devotion. In essence, even existence. You see, when you place the transitory, the transient, the impermanent next to the permanent, when you place finite and next to infinite, it doesn't exist. You see, infinity plus 1 or minus 1 is still infinity. It doesn't work that way. So in mathematics, when the discourse is about God, his existence is real existence. Ours, when juxtaposed, is non-existence. Now, Allah reminds us that, look, worship, devotion is to God. وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِلذِّكْرِ. Establish the prayer for my remembrance or my mindfulness, for this mindfulness of God, this remembrance of God. Okay. The second verse, Surah Al-Ankabut, that Utlu ma uhiya ilayka min. Now this is obviously to the Prophet, that recite to them what has been revealed to you. Wa aqimis salata inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar wa la dhikrullahi akbar wallahu ya'lamu ma tasna'un. Now this is another interesting verse, and we're going to come back to this, that not only it repeats the same thing, establish the salah. Why? You establish it, it's already mentioned for the remembrance of God, but here a function is mentioned as well. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. That it has a function to it. Okay, so that's interesting. And I want to slightly unpack that, but before we do, just moving to the next verse. We're right here. Now this in Surah Al-Mudaththir, actually, I think, have I missed? Right here. وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ طَرَفَيَ النَّهَارِ وَزُلَفًا مِنَ اللَّيْلِ. Now this is an interesting verse, both of these verses, that إِنَّ الْحَسَنَاتِ يُذْهِبْنَ السَّيِّئَاتِ ذَلِكَ ذِكْرَى لِلذَّاكِرِينَ. Here you are told at certain times to establish the prayer. Similar thing in the next verse, Surah Al-Isra, verse 78, أَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِدُلُوكِ الشَّمْسِ إِلَى غَسَقِ اللَّيْلِ. So it's talking about the sun when it moves or when it starts to, and there's a huge debate on this and we'll come to that, to nightfall, وَقُرْآنَ الْفَجْرِ, and the recitation of dawn, إِنَّ قُرْآنَ الْفَجْرِ كَانَ مَشْهُودًا. Okay, that the Quran of Fajr is something that is witnessed. And then you've got this verse, which I want us to come back to, that this is from Surah Al-Mudaththir, when it's a dialogue expressed on the tongues of the people in hell. That ma salakakum fi saqar, what brings you to this damnation, to hell? Qalu lam nakum min al-musallin, we were not people who prayed. Wa lam nakun nut'imul miskin, and we did not feed the poor. Wa kunna nakhudu ma'al kha'idin, and we just stirred trouble. That's what we did. Wa kunna nukadhibu bi yawmiddin, and we would deny in anything beyond death. Hatta atana al-yaqeen, until certainty came to us. Allah. And note, it doesn't say until death came, until certainty. Because that's in many ways, that is what death is. So, okay, let's take a quick overview of Salah. Just understanding, first of all, what is it? What does it mean, Salah? So in Arabic, they will say iltizam, ad-du'a, al-wala, things like this. Okay, linguistically, people say it gives some reference to adherence, to achieving. Some people have argued du'a, prayer, as in asking that kind of du'a, blessing prayer, and also an allegiance, in this case to God. Okay, so, and what it is they say it's af'al wa aqwal, that it begins with a takbir and it ends mukhtatima bit taslim. It ends with a saying salam, and it contains within it arkan and shara'it. It has what you can call pillars and conditions, which include standing, bowing, the ruku', sujood, qiyam, qu'ud, sitting. So this is salah. Okay. Now, the important question is, why must we pray? Think about it. Every single religion has some form of devotion. Every single faith that is manifest, or that is manifested through some ritual. Every single religion has this. And Islam has laid out the salawat. And it's done it in such a beautiful way, if you're going to think about it. We're going to come to how the format has been laid out, but it's something that it includes a physical, one could say, some form of, it's not exercise in the sense of doing cardiovascular exercise, but it is an exercising of physical postures. Okay, it is performed in a way that can be done as a community or an individual, but allows a person to collect themselves. So it's actually quite genius the way it is done, with elements of extreme humility, like bowing and prostrating. When you think about it, but also having moments of standing straight. And just standing still for whatever minutes it takes at that time of the day. This in and of itself is an incredible technique to bring the individual, to ground them. Their thoughts are everywhere, scattered. Bring them in. Okay. Now, is the the purpose of Salah, the question why, first of all, why? Allah's answered, the first verse we looked at, Surah Taha, lidhikri. Here, some people say as a remembrance, like an utterance, an expression of saying you worship God. That's fine as well. The other understanding is as a mindfulness to collect you. Now, you may say, one may ask here the question, but often we're not very mindful in Salah. And that's true. We're often not, unfortunately. But this is the brilliance of it, because it then sets you on a conveyor belt, on a treadmill, if you like, that is lifelong, where you are competing against you to improve. Because you're thinking, okay, I've not been attentive, let me try and collect my, and it doesn't work again. But it doesn't matter, you do it the next day. It is about mindfulness. That's its primary reason why we pray. The next question is, what does it do for us? What does Salah do for us? The second verse we looked at, which I believe was in Surah Ankabut, was about Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Now, we've got, if I just bring it, there you go, in Surah Al-Ankabut, verse 45. Now, you see, this is interesting, because here we're going to get into some cognitive dissonance. The verse of the Quran says, Salah prevents from fahsha, obscenities, and from immorality or reprehensible actions, from doing basically from doing bad things. But does it though? Because this is a question, does it? How many people do we know that pray and do absolutely, utterly repulsive things? Many. I'm sure if you know people who pray, then you definitely know people who, unfortunately, I hope you don't know anyone that does that, but unfortunately, many of us will know people that pray and they commit atrocities. And they look at ISIS as an example. It doesn't, Salah in and of itself doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that you're a good person. But then this verse in Surah Al-Ankabut suggests that, does it not? Inna salata tanha anil fahsha wal munkar. And you're like, and here you say, well, you're right. The verse does suggest that. And I'll just bring you back to it so you can see it. There it is. Now, you are right that here, this verse, it's interesting because if you take a look at it, Allah is telling the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so primarily this is addressing the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Utlu, that you recite to them. And then Allah does mention about establishing the prayer, but it's in the singular command. Why? Because it's to the Prophet primarily. Aqim it's not aqimu, where it may say, but here in this verse, aqim, you to the Prophet, inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. So who is the embodiment of that character that has devotion in Salah, that can tell you that this Salah can be a means of such mindfulness and God consciousness that you can become a much better person? That is the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not every Muslim That's the aspiration, that it can do that, not that it by necessity will. So this is very important to remember that, because people often, the amount of times you'll speak to someone, they'll hit, relationships will be a good case scenario. Many people will say, oh, I'm stuck in an abusive relationship. I married this guy. I made an absolute mistake. And you'll ask, oh, okay, did you talk to the person before you got married? Did you know each other? Did you? Oh, you see, he prayed 5 times a day. So I thought, well, you see, now that's naivety, assuming that because somebody prays, they are some kind of a great human being. They are not. Salah has the potential, there's an aspiration that a person through this can become very mindful, can become God conscious. Not necessarily. It's not the only way either to become God conscious or to become a great human being. There's many great human beings who are not even Muslim. They care about human beings. They have impeccable akhlaq. They, in their own way, may be very God conscious. And we covered that in the previous verse, that Allah doesn't say Muslims when he's speaking about, in those verses, about people being God conscious. So this function, what does Salah do for us? Well, what it does is, it is this, what you have is an umbilical cord connecting you to transcendental spirituality if you work on it. What you have, if you do become devoted, yes, there are ahadith that say that a person who commits to Salah, Allah will bless their rizq. Now, these ahadith are counterintuitive because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't, you think, well, how can my rizq be improved? Because what's my salah got to do with my business, for example? And it's true that these, look at my phone there, switching on. It's true, these are counterintuitive equations. But there is a sense of tawakkul, that in some of the hadith, it does state that through things like salah, Allah will bless your rizq. But it doesn't mean, that does not mean that it is in and of itself an income. So if a person thinks, look, oh, I want to make money, I know, I'll sit at home and just pray. It's nothing to do with that. That none of the hadith are trying to say that. That you need to ask yourself, when you ask, what does the salah do for me? You're like, what is its function for me? You see, the problem lies in your thinking. The salah is not here to serve you. It is a mechanism by which you religiously, punctually offer some gratitude. Yes, we may do a terrible job of it. We'll start again the next day. Maybe it'll be a lifelong practice. We collect ourselves and we offer some gratitude to God. What does it do for me? No, it's not about what do I do for people in serving God, or what do I do to serve God is the question. This, what does it do for me, that's what it will do. It will serve as that ritual. And I'll add, I've said this before as well. We are in a day and age where people are realizing through psychology that rituals are incredibly important. Having a ritual in life, it actually adds to the structure. So people have to invent rituals. And we've got one. We've got such a powerful ritual of salah. So you begin your day with it, you end your day with it. But don't see it as a burden. Don't see it as a burden. See it as something that you want to do. Yeah, I want to, let me take a bit of time. Let me do this offering. And you may lapse. Happens. Whenever you come, whenever your heart comes round to, yeah, I want to pray, come and pray. It's like that. This Islam is always there with its doors wide open. That's my understanding. But I wanted to highlight that about the function tonight. Was the right? So, okay. Coming to the actual salat, let's mention some quick points on it. There clearly are 5 salahs in a day. The Quran does not precisely mark out the salahs for us. Okay, the salawat is plural. I know I'm saying it in English, so salah, but it doesn't tell us that, for example, this is the name of this salah, this is when this salah happens. There are 2 verses in the Quran that scholars have used to highlight that, well, this can count as 5 prayers in a day. So they say, so some ulama, for example, they use the verse tarafay an-nahar. So they say, look, that's speaking about on the two sides of the day. So they say that. Some have said that's dhuhr and asr. They've used the verse of saying ila ghasaq al-Layl as for maghrib. They've used the verse zulafan min al-Layl. Zulaf means a little portion later. So they've said, well, okay, that's Isha wa Quran al-Fajr as Fajr. So they've used that to say, look, 5 salahs are in the Quran. Fair enough. One can take that ruling that the 5 are listed in the Quran, but they're not clear-cut listed like that. We take our understanding of the 5 prayers through the living tradition of Islam, which has been passed down through fiqh. So each community practiced, so around the Prophet, they learned, they taught it to their community and their children, who taught it to their children, who taught it to their children, in which time they started to document it. And it's been something that has been passed down as the living tradition. It's what I call the living tradition of Islam. Okay. And so this is where we've really learned about Salah. It's not the 5 Salahs, we haven't really learned them. They're not listed in the Quran in that way. Although you can, through those 2 verses, extract bil isharas, the kind of the 5 prayers, if you like. There is a difference among certain people. I know certain practices, so certain traditions, they combine prayers. So they still, so within the Tashayyu', the Shia tradition, they often will combine, they still have 5 prayers, but they combine Dhuhr and Asr and may combine Maghrib and Isha, but they still believe in 5 prayers as well, but they just combine them in their offerings. Combining Salah is also done in Sunni, in the Sunni tradition. Generally, it's done by most people. So, okay, with the exception of the Hanafi madhab that generally does not believe in the permissibility to combine prayers. All other schools of Sunni Islam believe that you can combine prayers. Hanafi is only accepted in Hajj, which is their madhab, but they say so in Hajj you can combine prayers, otherwise you can never combine prayers. And some of them consider, I mean, I suppose they do consider it almost sinful to combine prayers, but really that's an extreme position to take. We do respect their views, but the majority of Sunni Islam clearly accepts, and the majority of Islam really, Sunni and non-Sunni, accepts that you can combine prayers. You can combine Dhuhr and Asr, which are the day prayers, and you can combine Maghrib and Isha. Now, they disagree amongst themselves in the detail. When can you combine them? They mostly say for some kind of, they say for to prevent inconvenience or hardship. So, okay, hardship, to prevent hardship, they all pretty much agree, and inconvenience. And then some scholars have gone to the extent to say, well, even if it didn't become a habit, but you were, let's say, to make life easy, because that's another layer down, you could combine those prayers. So people like Ibn Sirin from the Salaf, people like Ashhab from the Malikiya, they said that you could, if, let's say, a person had to go somewhere, I'm going shopping somewhere. Obviously, in their day and age as well, they used to do their version of have to go to this town and get some food, but it's not actually that far. But by going, you know what, I'm just going to combine the prayers today and go. They said, well, as long as you're not doing it every single day and making it a habit, then it's fine. So you can see there's a vast difference. And there's hadith that the Prophet would combine the prayers for rain. If it was raining, he would combine Maghrib and Isha, let's say. And then there's some hadith that the Prophet would combine when just to create ease, as Ibn Abbas said when in his famous narration, he was praying and he was giving a speech and the Salah time went and he didn't stop and pray. And people said to him, Ibn Abbas, what on earth do you think you're doing? It's Salah time. You know, you get the holier than thou people. So they were trying to remind Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh about the Salah. So he just ignored them, and then afterwards he got down when he finished whatever he was doing, and then prayed and combined. And he said that the Prophet combined between prayers even when it was not raining and even when there was no danger. And they asked him, why would he do that? And he said, so he could create ease for his ummah. So these are the differences around the prayer, the times when they're offered. There are naturally some differences. I don't want to go too much into this because there's so much to cover. The Malikiya, the school of Medina, and the Shafi'iyya as well, I believe, they kind of borrow a bit of this as well from the Malikis. But the Malikis have this thing that the times of prayer overlap. So what they do with that is they say that Dhuhr time is Dhuhr time, and Asr time, obviously this is going to sound, at this part it's going to sound a bit simplistic and stupid, but just bear with me. So they say Asr time is Asr time. However, you see, Asr time is also what they call a daruri, a necessary time for Dhuhr, but it is still a Dhuhr time. So they divide the time of prayer into two times, ikhtiyari, so what you can call the default time or by choice, the chosen time, let's say, selected time, let's put it like that. And then you have the necessary time, the daruri, ikhtiyari and daruri. So they will say Dhuhr, when it is Dhuhr ikhtiyari, and when it's Asr, it's Dhuhr daruri, and Asr ikhtiyari and daruri. So basically, if you were praying Dhuhr in late Asr time, you're not praying it as a made-up prayer. You're not praying it as Qadah, you're praying it as Ada, because it's still Dhuhr time, but daruri. And they do the same thing with Maghrib and Isha. So they say Maghrib time is Maghrib ikhtiyari, and Isha time is Maghrib daruri. And it's Isha ikhtiyari and daruri. So as you can see, some of the madhabs have a different way of looking at Salah. And this is something going on since the time of Imam Malik coming to our day and age. So nothing to, it's good to always learn. If you don't know about that, then that's a learning curve. Alhamdulillah, you're learning something new about Islam and how the scholars looked at things differently. Okay. And so that's an overview. What's also interesting is when does the Salah become obligatory? It's interesting that there's a debate. Do they become obligatory because of the time that they are attached to, or with the time that they are attached to, as Imam Shatibi highlights? Now, why does this make a difference? Let's say Isha, it becomes obligatory when the horizon after sunset has kind of all started to kind of darken. Now, is it just placed with that as a contingent, or is it by necessity? Is that what makes it obligatory? So let's say when in those countries in the world, or that part of the world where it doesn't get that dark after sunset, then Isha doesn't technically kick in if you say it's because of that time. Because that time, if Allah has only made Isha obligatory when the sunset horizon has darkened, but you live in a part of the world where it doesn't darken, so after sunset it stays light, it's what they call the twilight, then Isha technically hasn't kicked in. So the other way of looking at it is, as Imam Shatibi writes in his Muwafaqat, that Salah does not become obligatory because of the time, it becomes obligatory with that time. So the obligation already exists, it's just this is the alarm for it. And if that alarm isn't there, you can estimate a different alarm. So you can just estimate it and pray. And some people also use another hadith, the hadith of the Dajjal, to say, well, you can estimate times as well. And this was the famous, the popular debate that I think in recent years that Sheikh Atabek was having in the UK about the twilight period in the summertime in the UK, because Isha time technically doesn't kick in, and neither does Fajr time. You can't tell when Fajr begins. So there was a debate, does Isha exist or not? And this is a Hanafi debate as well historically. So okay, I thought I'd cover some of these issues. Was there anything I thought, was there any notes I made? Right, actually a quick little point. Salah being as important as it is, what if you don't pray? Are you considered a kafir? Now, that is such a huge claim. So naturally, like anything in fiqh, the scholars of Islam have massively disagreed on this. There is nothing in the Quran that states by leaving Salah you become a kafir. However, people have used verses of the Quran, like this verse right here that you can see from Surah Mudaththir, that where the inhabitants of damnation and hell ask, what brings you to hell? They say, قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. We were not from those who prayed. As you can see, verse 43. However, the verses don't stop there, because they go on to say, we were not those who fed the poor, we would be amongst those who stirred up trouble, and we were amongst those who used to deny any life after death. So I think it's a bit unfair to stop it after the first verse and say that was the cause for them to go into hell, because that is mentioned as a factor amongst many variables, amongst many factors for the ruin of these people, that they were horrible to mankind, that they wouldn't feed the poor, that they used to stir trouble, that they were, mischievous, that they used to deny any reckoning. And notice it says the word nukadhib, that, that this was their denial and the way they denied the reckoning. So now, however, there have been certain ulama that have said, look, if you abandon the prayer, you are a kafir. Okay. And amongst them was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. There was Imam Ishaq ibn Rahaway, Abdullah ibn Mubarak. Some tiny proportion of the Malikiya, like Abdul Malik ibn Habib al-Maliki, seems to have gone that way. A bit disappointing on that one, but hey, that's Abdul Malik ibn Habib al-Maliki, not Imam Malik or the Maliki madhab, but just one odd Maliki there. But you have these scholars primarily who stood for that if you left the salah you became a kafir, and they based this on a variety of hadith transmitted, a lot of them from people from companions like Anas ibn Malik. There's also some from Ubadat ibn Samit. There's Buraidah ibn al-Hasib. There's yes, I believe there's a narration from Ibn Abbas, although that's weak. But many of these are weak as well, by the way, these narrations. But they're variations of a hadith saying, Al-ahd alladhi baynana wa baynahum as-salah, man tarakaha faqad kafar. Now, what's interesting is this hadith, or this variation, even though there's problems in the chains, in several of the chains, but even if we accept it, it says the covenant between us and them. You see, now what's interesting is the hadith is speaking about identity. what demarcates the believers from the disbelievers in the time. And it mentions the thing was salah, that we do this collective practice as an identity. So whosoever is abandoning it is as though they're abandoning us. Faqad kafar. Now that's the that's the hadith, and there's slight variations of it. What's interesting is in many variants it says man tarakaha muta'ammidan, whosoever leaves it intentionally, and it mentions amd like an qasd, like I don't want to kind of pray. In some variations it says whosoever leaves it is now a mushrik, faqad ashrak, which once again doesn't really make any sense. The majority Sunni schools of Islam and the majority of all people, even non-Sunnis within Islam, have believed that leaving salah does not make someone a kafir. In fact, Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi argues that even he tries to dissociate Imam Ahmad from that position, saying that it's wrong what they say about Imam Ahmad. His real opinion was that you're not a kafir. So this is the debate surrounding it. There are many hadith. What's interesting is there's hadith, a number of hadith that, and I have one here actually? Let me see. I don't know if oh, right. So actually I do, you've got two right there from, you've got the first one from Hudhayfa, that he mentions يأتي على الناس زمان, that a time will come لا يبقى معهم من الإسلام إلا قول لا إله إلا الله, that there will come a time in Islam where there is nothing except the word La ilaha illallah, that people beyond saying that there's nothing about their Islam. They don't pray, they don't do anything. So the person says, and will that be of any avail? Does that help them? قال تنجيه من النار. He said that of course it grants them eternal salvation. You see, so, and there's varied narrations. You can see there's a similar one there by Ubadat ibn Samit, that whosoever says, who believes in God and believes in the messenger of Allah. It's interesting that he mentions there about Jesus as well, that being a servant of God, but the word of God and the spirit of God. I thought that was an interesting kind of, because the early community having this Judeo-Christian tradition, and then it's interesting that they transmit that in saying that La ilaha illallah anna Muhammad Rasulullah wa anna Isa abduhu, mentioning wa kalimatum minhu, and Jesus is the word of God. And it's interesting. But coming to the point that you've got here, people saying La ilaha illallah it is enough, as you can see in that hadith, for people being Muslims. It is unacceptable. So, okay, just finishing the debate first of the discussion, that's what demarcates. So there were a tiny amount of ulama that said, and it's not about the numbers, it's not about a democratic process, although the overwhelming majority of Sunni and non-Sunni Islam said that salah does not make you a kafir if you leave salah. But it's not about democracy, it's about the evidence. The evidence in the Quran or Sunnah does not show that people, by leaving salah, became kafir. Okay, so that seems to be a very, it is a view, but it doesn't seem to be a strong view at all. Can somebody call other Muslims a kafir? You cannot at all, utterly. If they don't pray, it's you. First of all, you are not God, and you are not a prophet of God, and nobody is in a position to be calling Muslims kafir over whether they pray or don't pray. It is not your domain. Islam is here for you to practice. Your salah is for each and every one of us. We pray. You can encourage someone to pray. You can encourage. You can't impose salah on someone. Okay, it is unacceptable. to impose salah. So it's interesting that in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they wouldn't even call someone to salah after the adhan. They would consider that, generally a lot of the Salaf consider that a bid'ah. They call it tathweeb. So, calling like saying to someone, hey, let's go pray, or knocking on someone's door saying, let's go pray, was, according to the Salaf, considered a bid'ah in Islam, and it was because the adhan has been done. So nobody calls anyone. It's a personal responsibility. You have to be mature enough to conduct it yourself. There's no harm in going with your friends. If I said to my friend, look, we're going to go together, so why don't you come to mine and we go together? That's different. But going up to someone to kind of tell them, I'm just saying many of the Salaf considered it a bid'ah. If a person does it out of goodwill, then okay, fine, that's something they do out of goodwill. But if it's patronizing, then it shouldn't be done. And if it's imposing, then it's actually they are doing a double wrong. So not only do they not understand Islam and its rulings, they're actually committing a wrong by trying to impose it on someone. So that's the ruling surrounding salah. I thought it's very important. Let's share it. Cool. Let's move on, people. Right. Okay, quick add-on question, since we covered salah. Somebody's asked about witr. Right, that's not the question, but okay, I'll come to that question. Love the comment. I watched all you. Love your work. Allah, shukran, Fahad, much love. But there was a question about witr. Since we discussed salah, okay, fair enough, we'll cover it very quickly. The only obligatory prayers are the fard prayers. Okay, the obligatory prayers are the fard prayers. The sunan prayers are not obligatory, although it's very good practice and highly emphasized in Islam to pray the sunan prayer. But in a binary code, if you're looking at it through a strict binary, you have everything is fard, or it is a nafal. It is a kind of voluntary prayer. So you see the different, like the Maliki madhab, that's how they see it. They see it in a binary, that you have fard, and then you have everything is amongst the nawafil. And you have the sunnah, which are, so it is a voluntary prayer, but it is highly emphasized. Voluntary meaning it's voluntary to do. It's not an obligation, but it's highly emphasized. And some sunan, so that weren't practiced much by the Prophet, are considered what we call mustahab, mustahab, okay, recommended prayers. So in the Maliki method, there's no such thing as just general nafal. So, right, by that, let me qualify that. What I mean by that is there's no set nafal, like the way the Hanafis have. So the Hanafis will say Dhuhr has 2 nafal. That in the Malikis and the Shafi'is doesn't really make much sense, especially in the Maliki madhab. It doesn't make any sense, because nafal, you see, according to the Hanafis, just means a bonus prayer, which is fine according to the Hanafi madhab. But you see, according to the Maliki madhab, you only pray with the salah what the Prophet taught you. And if you want to pray extra, you can, but they're never defined. There's no parameters to extra prayers. You want to pray 50 extra prayers, you want to pray 2, it's up to you, but you can't have a defined parameter. You shouldn't anyway. So they generally, so there's an overlap of terminology when these madhabs use the word like mustahab, or mandub, or recommended. The Maliki madhab is talking about lesser sunan. And when we say sunnah, we're only talking about emphasized sunan. But the Hanafis have they have several other categories. So they have a category called wajib, which is in between fard and sunnah. And in that they place witr. So they say witr is obligatory, if you don't pray, you are sinful according to the Hanafi madhab. And the Hanafis, to be fair, in their categorizations are a lot more strict. So they will consider if you don't pray even the sunan, I think if you don't pray the sunan, there's debate. They may even consider you sinful then. And there's a lot of, they are quite strict in their way of looking at things. All of these things are just the efforts of scholars. These are not coming to us from the Quran or from the Sunnah like that. So if a person feels a bit uncomfortable, it's up to them which madhab they want to go with, which fiqh they want to go with. Just because you're born in a particular fiqh doesn't mean you have to stick with it. I'm not saying, obviously, I am saying the Maliki madhab is much better, but I'm not saying the Hanafi madhab is a bad madhab. It's not. It's also, an awesome madhab. But today, unfortunately, there is a lot of bureaucracy in that madhab, which has kind of made it very, it's troubled waters, shall we say. But otherwise, it is also an awesome madhab with many kind of incredible rulings in it. Okay, let's move on. Right. Any news on Sheikh Atabek? I don't know. Tuning in from New York, much love, Mufti. Shukran. I'm not sure what you mean news about Sheikh Atabek. Do you mean about coming on Mindtrap? Nope. Last I heard was Sheikh Atabek was interested, but he had some court cases going on, and which he speaks about publicly on his Facebook. So I know he's just been very busy with them. Right. So, people, well, we've gone on so long today. Speaking of Salat that we spoke of, there was a little story I thought I'd share with you. But before I do, there's a build-up, a legend of within Islamic history. Let me see if I can bring up. Here he is. People, let me present to you AbdulMu'min ibn Ali al-Ghoumi. Ghoumi. Interesting name. AbdulMu'min al-Ghoumi. He is de facto maybe the word founder isn't really accurate, but he is the key figure in Islamic history who establishes the Mohad Dynasty, which in Arabic is the Muwahhideen dynasty. They were one of the most powerful industries. Industries. What am I saying? Dynasties in Islam, and in its heyday, ruled over the largest region that any dynasty, I suppose maybe the early Umayyad could be excluding them. But generally, especially in later Islam, that any dynasty ruled over. So they ruled much more than this in their heyday. In the map there that you can see, this was in the early Mohad dynasty. So what happens later on, they move further north and they conquer most of the Iberian Peninsula, that is most of Spain and all of Portugal and most of Spain. And Africa, they go further south so as to incorporate a third of the African continent. And you can see this here was their flag, that kind of checkered board that you can see. Yeah, there you go. It's an inspiration for either they love playing chess, and that's some designs from the time of the Mohad dynasty. They were an immensely powerful and incredibly affluent dynasty, and so really known for their kind of military strength. The Mohad, the Muwahhideen, Allah, the people of Tawheed, because they began with Muhammad ibn Tumurt, who was the Mahdi. He claimed to be the Mahdi, a Messiah, and he was fed up with the Moravid dynasty, or the Moravid. They spell it as V, but the V and B in Spanish is the same. But or in Arabic, the Morabitin. They were fed up with the Morabitin, and Al-Mahdi ibn Tumurt, he kind of preached, and he was considered maybe a madman by many, but then he got his believers, as people do, and he started to tell them, and he got his special elite, kind of special select people, and told them and gave them all these promises, and said they were there to establish the kingdom of God. And he tried, and he miserably failed. Doesn't sound very good when you say it like that. But the man tried. Karna parta hai. And he was the caliph of the Morabitin actually had him arrested on a particular occasion. It just goes to show, sometimes you have it right there in your hand. Pata nahi lagta yaar. You don't know what you're in possession of. So he actually had him, and he said, that, what shall we do with him? And they said that execute him, the Mahdi. This is what they told the caliph. And the caliph looked at him and he said, why? He said, do you really see any threat from him? All the while, Mahdi ibn Tumurt, he said in the words of Raj Kumar that hum tum nahi, hum aap hai. So he let him go. The caliph of the Morabitin, he said he had him imprisoned, and they told him, look, the viziers advised, the ministers, they said that execute him. Better safe than sorry. When in doubt, just kill. When in doubt, put out. So there you go. So they said, look, just to be on the safe side, execute him. And he looked at him and he said, well, this is just a madman. What could a madman possibly do against the might of a dynasty? Allah, Allah, Allah. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامِ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. You see, Allah says, but those days, we circulate them amongst people. So at times, a person can become deluded. So they let him go, and he rallied a little crew, and then it got a bit bigger, and then he had a troop, you could say like a brigade, and they tried to attack Marrakesh. Marrakesh was the capital for. It was made by the Morabitin, the Moravid dynasty. So they tried to attack it, and obviously they failed miserably, and they tried again, and then he tried to recruit more members to his kind of. It was a borderline cult, because they believed him to be the Messiah, the Mahdi, and many of them lost their lives, and the Mahdi himself almost got killed in battle. Eventually he does get injured, and then he retreats, and then he fails in his attempt. He never sees the success that his words had set into motion. You see, but I tell you, have you guys heard of the Pygmalion effect? In case you say Mufti doesn't share psychology with you. See, the Pygmalion effect is an effect that it's like a fulfilling prophecy, that you treat somebody in accordance with an aptitude, a capability, and then they perform in accordance to that expectation. So a coach sees he assumed, let's say he treats a particular player, let's say a football coach or whatever, I don't know, or whatever sport, he treats a member with a certain expectation that, oh, come on, you can do better than that. And then that member performs in accordance to the expectation. So this is seen as the Pygmalion effect. And it can be called like a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. And this is what happens. You see, along comes this individual. So they spell it P-Y, Pygmalion, not pig as in pig, P-I-G, but P-Y-G, Pygmalion effect. So, yes, thank you. Somebody wrote it out here. Yeah, there it is. Thank you, Scope. Right, so along comes Mahdi was a Berber, by the way, but the Murabitin were also Berber. They were Berbers as well. Along comes this individual from this tribe. His name is AbdulMu'min ibn Ali, young man, nothing special, not from any, he's not a luminary, he's not from any elite. In fact, he is a young man, capable, but nothing special about him. But he catches the eye of Mahdi ibn Tumart. In his first encounter with Ibn Tumart, the Mahdi says to him, he looks at him and he asks him, what's your name, boy? Or what's your name, young man? And he says, AbdulMu'min. And he just kind of glances straight into his eyes. And he tells him that Allah has written greatness for you. He says that at your hands, great civilizations will crumble. And he says, and at your knees, dynasties will collapse in front of you. These words of the Mahdi ibn Tumart struck so powerfully into the psyche of AbdulMu'min that he went on to conquer the Murabit dynasty and establish an empire of his own that would not only span over a century, but become one of the most powerful empires in human civilization in its age. AbdulMu'min ibn Ali takes that so much to heart that once the Mahdi passes away, he kind of wages this relentless campaign where he refuses to give up. And in a sudden turn of the tide, this new cult gains the upper hand and conquers Marrakesh. And the moment they conquer Marrakesh, the capital, the rest of the cities and towns collapse to them. And he goes on, and they were obviously fighters. There's no doubt about that. But it's this belief that he had in himself. And it's amazing how these beliefs are instilled by words that are no short of magic. Wallahi. When people speak of magic, I was speaking on my Discord group, my Patreon Discord group the other day, and I was saying that take a look at Elon Musk. He sends a tweet with a few words, and they change the face of current economics. How is this not what the ancients would have called magic? By uttering a few words. You see, in the past, somebody would believe I say hocus pocus or I say a magic spell and this happens. And here is a man who I personally am in awe of as well, Elon Musk, who sends a tweet with a few words and the entire crypto market trembles. Wow. The power of words, people. AbdulMu'min ibn Ali was somebody like that as well. And the Mahdi, however weird some of his beliefs were, he was a man whose words struck powerfully when he chose them to. And the reason I was mentioning AbdulMu'min ibn Ali was he sets up this great empire, but he sets it in accordance with the belief of the Mahdi. So one of the things they do is the world that they conquer was mainly Maliki in fiqh. So what they do is they launch this attack against Maliki fiqh because they say that Maliki fiqh is a deviation. And the Mahdi said, we reject all these schools of law and we only go by the Quran was Sunnah. Nice claim, but it was from the Messiah, the Mahdi at the time. And so they reject all these schools of law. And he was also very surprisingly, the Mahdi Mahdi ibn Tumurt was incredibly Ash'ari. So he imposed Ash'ari Aqidah. Now, so this becomes the trend, and this becomes the kind of constitution that no judges, Maliki judges, are allowed to teach or preach Maliki fiqh, and no judge can rule by Maliki fiqh, and we must get rid of these books. So what happens is this dynasty now passes from after AbdulMu'min ruled for around 30 years, I believe. He has a very incredibly powerful reign. After him, it's his child Yusuf, who is also quite anti-fiqh. And then his child Yaqub, known as Yaqub al-Mansur, who made Rabat in Morocco today. Rabat al-Fath was a city created by Yaqub al-Mansur. So, and those of you that know the Qutbiyya in Marrakesh today, that was built in his time, Yaqub al-Mansur, and that's why they have, and he had the same in Seville. So Seville was the Iberian capital. So in Spain, it was Seville, Ishbiliya, and in Africa, it was Marrakesh. So, and you had the same tower built in both. Now, in Yaqub al-Mansur's time, he also commanded that we get rid of all of Maliki fiqh books. He reinforced that doctrine, and we burn. In fact, we get rid and burn. And but to be fair to Yaqub al-Mansur, he was incredibly. He was an enlightened individual and was not dogmatic at his core. So even though he began with the tradition of his ancestors in saying we believe in the Mahdi and we do this and we do that, but he was open to reason, and as he started to engage with scholars, they showed him that, and he saw that his ways were wrong, like they didn't add up. So he actually changed the beliefs. He was the first of the Muwahhideen to remove the Mahdi belief from the dynasty and say we no longer endorse the Mahdi, we no longer endorse that he was ma'soom, infallible. We don't even, in fact, he removed the Mahdi-ness entirely from the dynasty. And he was very pro-philosophy. In fact, he's the one who meets Ibn Rushd and has that debate and discussion with him, and he was very open. And he later on became very comfortable with Maliki fiqh coming back, even though it wasn't formally instated, but he kind of turned a blind eye and allowed it, despite in his early days saying that we should burn the books. And I'll tell you, this is, and it ties in incredibly with our Salah segment, that you see, in his early days, you know, when, Josh, youthfulness, you know, when the power of youth, he's like, he would say, burn all the Maliki fiqh books. Who are these people? So what they do is in one of his gatherings, I think it may have been in Seville, he rounds up the scholars, the great scholars, and the caliph comes, Yaqub al-Mansur, Allah, in all his haiba and awe. The king, humble yourself in the presence, Allah, of his majesty. And the wazir, the minister, first stands up and he gives a khutbah. And he says that what is this? He says that they continue to preach these books of the Malikiyya and the this and the that, and they have been outlawed. And they continue to teach this madhab and all this kind of stuff. And he gives this kind of speech. And then Yaqub al-Mansur rises. Hum hai, hum tum nahi, hum aap hai. So he stands and he says it reaches me that they say that in the kitab, that they have a book they refer to as al-kitab. And anybody who knows Maliki fiqh knows what al-kitab is. Al-kitab is the mudawwana of the fatwa of Imam Malik. We call it al-kitab. It's referred to in the books, they say fil kitab, in al-kitab. He says that they say that we find that it is said in al-kitab. He says, what is al-kitab? The book. What is this? The book. The book. The book. What is this one? He says, what is this? The book. He says that they say that in the book, it says if a person is praying and something happens to his prayer, let him repeat it in the time. As in, if the time is gone, then he doesn't have to repeat it if he remembers out of the time. But in the time, if he recalls, he should repeat it. He says, what is this nonsense? He says, there is no book, al-kitab, except kitab Allah. Allah, what a dialogue though. What a quote. And he says, if the salah is either valid or it is invalid. He says, if it is valid, then there's no need to repeat it. And if it is invalid, they must always repeat it. Where did they get this nonsense from? And he said, burn these books. So all of these scholars are standing there in silence. Nobody dares to kind of speak. So there was a Maliki legend by the name of Ibn Zarqun. Allah, legend of his time, from Seville in Spain. And he says, Hamalatni al-ghayra. He says, I couldn't take it anymore. I can't take it, man. This one, too personal, He says, I couldn't take it anymore. And this Ibn Zarqun is the same person who has a commentary on the Muwatta where he combines Al-Baji and the Istidhkar of Ibn Abdul Barr in one book called the Anwar. So this Ibn Zarqun legend, he says, if I have permission to speak. So Yaqub looks at him, thinks, he says, go on then, what? He says to him that, look, con permiso, if you allow me, ijazat ho to. He says that this issue that you speak of, its evidence is in the Sunnah. He says there is a hadith in the Sahih that a man came to the masjid and prayed in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he finished, the Prophet said, Qum wa salli fa innaka lam tusalli. Stand and pray again because you did not pray properly. He says the person repeated it and the Prophet said again, Qum wa salli fa innaka lam tusalli. And this happens, a very famous hadith, by the way, in which the Prophet repeats it about 3 times. And then he says to the Prophet, I don't know, teach me how to pray. And the Prophet says, when you stand, do this. When you go into ruku, do this. And the Prophet outlines the prayer. He says the Prophet only commanded him to repeat the prayer of the time, al-waqtiyah, did not tell him to repeat all his gone prayers. Allah. This struck Mansour like a thunderbolt. Because, this attitude of we get rid of the madhabs, get rid of fiqh, we don't need the madhabs, this kind of empty claim that we go by Quran wa Sunnah, and as though the school of Medina didn't. And just because you don't know the evidences, to assume that they don't have evidences, it struck him like a thunderbolt. So he kind of just dropped his head and he just left. And they say it's after that he advised his ministers that leave them alone. Like if they want to practice and teach Maliki fiqh, let them do it. And so this then became a turning point in the entire Mohad dynasty. And this is the time where people like Ibn Rushd were alive, and Ibn Zarqun and Ibn Abil Jadd and all these great scholars. But I thought I'd share that story with you because it was incredibly interesting that you've got this Salah point, you've got these caliphs, you've got this, and also this arrogance of thinking that when scholars come up with rulings, that they don't know what they're talking about just because it doesn't appear to you by saying that the Malikis say, oh, you only repeat the prayer of the time if something went wrong in it. But let's say you didn't, let's say something went wrong in yesterday's prayer, but then you forgot and today you remembered about it. It's not necessary to repeat it. So now that sounds, because in a black and white world, people say, well, either the prayer is wrong or it's right. If it's wrong, then you should always repeat it. But yet these scholars, Imam Malik built that ruling upon knowledge. Alimahu man alim wa jahilahu man jahil. Whosoever knows it, knows it. Whosoever doesn't, doesn't. I thought I'd share that with you. It was an incredible story. I love these kind of stories. When I read them, I kind of get all... I'm like, whoa, I get really kind of drawn into it. All right, so let's move on. Mufti, would this be covered in your Al-Andalus from Rise to Fall? I don't know if this story is covered in there. I can't remember now. I have to redo that series because it's been so long. I see Saracen, you're doing it. Much love for the super chat. Right. So what's your view on the 11th century Spanish knight Rodrigo Diaz el Cid? Was he pro-Muslim or anti-Muslim? El Cid, which comes from the Arabic word, is a known character or personality, which comes from the Arabic word Sayyid, El Sayyid, because the Arabs, especially the Moroccans, they would, the North Africans, they would, or the Moors, they don't say Sayyid often, they would just say Sid. So even today they say Sidi as opposed to saying Sayyidi. So El Cid was El Sayyid, and he was like a client knight, if you like. He was for hire. He was a mercenary that you could hire, and I don't think he was against Islam. Some people claim he may have even been Muslim. I don't know. I don't think it's clearly stated. There are some arguments. It's been years now. I watched something where there was some speculation that he may have been Muslim, but it's possible. But he seems to be an independent figure that was. He was available for hire. If you want to hire him, he was a mercenary. I mean, he was a very good warrior, and so he had his own kind of little crew, that this kind of army. And Muslims, at times he fought alongside Muslims, at times he fought against Muslims. Sometimes he fought alongside Christians, sometimes against Christians. So that's yeah. Right. So okay, shukran for that. All right, that kind of froze there for a moment. Right, I didn't share the link today, did I? Oh, I tell you what, shall I share it or has it been too long? Let me see where we are with the. I'm trying to see how. Whoa, is that the time, people? I'll tell you what, shall I just share it for one or two people, maybe? Go on then, let's see. There you go. I've shared the link. All right. Mufti, you've become interested in Tassawuf. I'm not interested in Tassawuf. If that's depends what you mean by Tassawuf. It depends what you mean by that. So I'm interested in the ruh. I'm interested in which I translate as consciousness. I'm interested in those people that walk that path historically from Islam, like Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. I'm interested in those people like Mansur al-Hallaj or Maulana Rumi, or people like that were people of the path that kind of spoke on these intricate issues of consciousness and non-duality and ego death and stuff like that. I am very interested in that. I'm not interested in any institutionalized process. I'm not interested in institutions. Right. So, all right. What is going on? I'll share that. Go. Check. I don't think there was any. All right. Yeah. When you say Qadah, Capo Khan, did the Prophet make up? I've discussed this before. I've got a video on YouTube. Watch it, where I speak about Qadah and the differences, and I even highlight my view about that. So I'm not said anything about Qadah on this, apart from speaking about the story of Qadah al-Waqtiyah, repeating the Salah in the time. So as long as it's the Salah's time and the debate between Ibn Zarqun and Yaqub al-Mansur, but I've not discussed the topic here, so you've misunderstood me. Oh, right. Okay, you're saying you were responding. Yep. Okay, shukran. What's that? I should do audiobooks. You nutter. Would you? That's an interesting thought. Should I? Then you'd have to hear my voice. Hello, people. Hello. What are your thoughts on LOA? What's LOA? What's LOA, people? What's LOA? What is LOA? What are your thoughts on LOA? Did you see Dawa talk about the vaccine damage? I don't know what Dawa talk is. I haven't. Law of association. Law of association. Huh? No idea who they are. Salam Mufti from Bosnia. Fah, much love. Shukran. Right. Right. So, would I be having Firas Dhahabi on Mindtrap in the future? Inshallah, why not? I am in touch with Firas. In fact, he just messaged me last week, just catching up. So, yeah, he was telling me a lot's kind of going on in Canada as well, and the whole lockdown is tensing. And But yeah, I mean, it's getting quite, stressful. I thought, no. So, yeah, inshallah, why not? I do look forward to it. But he is very busy as well. I do respect that. Shukran. Asim Khan from Houston, salam, good pig segment. Shukran, I appreciate it. Those of you that haven't watched my segment on why is pork haram, watch it. It's on YouTube. I give a detailed overview of what led to this understanding of the impurity of pork. So I give that explanation. They are going into detail about the kind of historical development of that of the repulsive stigma that is so deep in the psyche of the Judeo-Christian, especially Judeo tradition. So, law of attraction. Right. Okay. I have spoken about that previously, the law of attraction. Are snake eater, somebody called Snake Eater is asking, are all snakes halal to eat and do other stuff with? What this other stuff, man? What this other stuff? Predetermination in general. Whoa, that's a lengthy comment, lengthy question. Predetermined. I'm too exhausted to do that right now, to be honest, to cover that. Rami, pumpkin spice latte on me, Habibi. Shukran, Habibi. There's many, you could say there's many ahibba, many kind of Habibs, beloveds out there, but there's only one Rami Habib. Huh? All right, that's his name, Rami, by the way. So, I see Saracen, you're doing it, yeah, too much, and this is so much love. Yeah, I'm getting so on yukhajiluni, So, Mufti, can you do an episode on the ancient Israelite civilization? Ancient Israelite civilization. What do you mean by the ancient Israelite civilization? Do you mean as in the Israelites, their whole journey, or do you mean by that just the kind of monarchy, the united monarchy? And that would be an interesting kind of discussion. Mufti Ustad Usama Canon. Sure, I have got a video. If you haven't watched my video discussing the passing of Ustad Usama Canon, and also me just airing my thoughts unfiltered about the whole, just the phenomenon, and how I do feel, and I stand by my words, that Ustad Usama was betrayed by his community and by the industry at large, with all the clerics and imams involved. And so, yeah, I stand by that. And because it's, it's, you see, what hurts is ultimately, this is nothing but just another industry, isn't it? When we have to be real about it. And it's kind of a bit painful when you think about it. This is why when somebody said, are you interested in Tassawuf? I'm not interested in any of these industries. I don't want to really be a part of any of these power structures. And yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? That's become it's very saddening in that sense. That what's that poem that Teri neem kash nigahein, tera zere lab tabassum, यूं ही एक अदाए मस्ती, यूं ही एक फरेब सादा. He says that these kind of, you have Neem Kash is half opened eyes. I suppose in English they might say kind of come to bed eyes, or but these Neem Kash half open eyes. Tera zere lab tabassum. This kind of smile that you carry. It says yuhi ik adai masti. It says this is nothing but a kind of tantalizing. It's a tease. Yuhi ik fareb sada. It's nothing but a simple fraud, a deception. But may Allah make things easy. It's yeah. Let's see, there's another Nora Parish. Oh, shukran, muchas gracias. The night diver had a question. I wonder about too. Why does Quran say Allah will harden the hearts of disbelievers? Would that be setting up people to fail? No, I think, right. So that's a very good question. Now, you'll notice in many of the verses where it speaks, and there's several verses in the Quran where it speaks about the heart heartening. Sorry, tell it's getting late now. The heart hardening. Right. So, for example, ثم قست قلوبكم فهي كالحجارة أو أشد قسوة. And in many of these, Allah will say that it was by the disease that was in their hearts. مرض في قلوبهم فزادتهم مرضا. You see, the thing is that this is what intensifies that they were on a path. So when Allah says that He misguides, or then He hardens the hearts, let's say, what this is in reference to is allowing people to take those paths. You see, and this ties in, I did say I had answered the question about law of attraction, but it ties in to some extent to that question also, because you see, what you put out there, Allah will allow you, and even if you seek that path, then those doors will be held open for you if that's what you want. So if you put out evil and harmful kind of aspirations, if we can call them that, or these kind of malintentions, these dark desires in that sense, malicious, you put it out there that this is what you are, this is what you're on this path of destruction, then Allah will allow you to be on that path. And by extension, by zooming out, one could say Allah has then enabled them. But as you zoom in, it is that these people are seeking that path. Allah's not turning them away from, He's not doing anything, He's allowing it then. And one could say, oh, in that sense, from a perspective, one could say, oh, so Allah has misguided them. But really, and in that sense, you have Allah has that name, the one who allows to be misguided. Because ultimately, when you're coming back in, it is the willpower and the decisions and the kind of the not just goals, but what these people are seeking. So this is why I said it ties into that kind of law of attraction thing, that they are putting it out there. They are sending out these kind of malicious frequencies, if you like, and Allah is allowing it. He's not going to, and from that extension, you could say, well, Allah hardens their hearts. but it's not setting them up to fail. It's not that these are good people who are seeking to do good, and Allah is then saying, oh, you know, that person, we're going to trip him up. Not at all. But shukran, that's a very interesting question indeed. Right. So, okay. All 78 watching. I need to wrap up. It's gone on. Whoa, is that the time? People, I got to wrap this up. But yes, of course, do like, do share, people. If you haven't already done that, then of course, YouTube, make sure you've liked, you've subscribed. Spread the love, man. Do the love, man. Don't do the hate. So, people, I'm going to leave you with that. Let's wrap this up. It's been epic, as always. It's been emotional. And those of you that are reading the book, do continue reading that. For the end of month book club on this month's book is Brave New World by Huxley. Very fascinating. It's a must anyway. So even if you're not reading it for that, it's a must to read in life. It's definitely one of those. I could see clearly you're online as well. Ahlan wa sahlan. Right below it saying my super chat. Did I miss a super chat? Mufti, please get Robert Sepper on your channel. I'll have to look into who that is. But sure, if that's somebody that's interesting and interested, then why not? Do any recommendations, you can send them to me on Instagram. I'm usually quite responsive on Instagram. You can also, if you if you want to do the VIP, man, you're like, yeah, I don't queue. Do I wait in a queue? I don't wait in the queue, man. Jahan hum khade hote hain, line wahi se shuru hoti hai. As Amitabh Bachchan said, that where I stand, that's where the queue begins. So those of you for the VIP, man, you can go to Patreon and you can sign up. There's different tiers, and there's also some exclusives. There's exclusive tiers, one-on-one, man. There's other tiers, but there's also a Discord that is associated with that called Mindscape. So you kind of get onto that and can share in discussions there. People, much love. It's been epic. Take care of yourselves. Remember me in a kind dua, and do keep looking out for the videos and spreading the love. Salamullahi alaikum wa khuda hafiz.